You think you know what loyalty looks like? Wait until you hear what this woman did when the people who raised her made her choose between love and blood, with a clock ticking down to midnight. 12 hours before the deadline, a woman named Esther stood in a kitchen that smelled like her grandmother's hands, palm oil and thyme and the faint sweetness of overripe plantain. She was holding a phone in one hand and a ring in the other. The phone was ringing. The ring was warm from being gripped too long. In 12 hours, she would either walk down an aisle toward a man her family despised, or walk away from him forever to keep the only people who had ever loved her. She could not do both. They made sure of that. And what she chose, and how she chose it, would leave every single person in this story changed. Welcome everyone to another story. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? Florida, Lagos, maybe Trinidad, or the United Kingdom? Let us know. Now I want you to pay attention to this story very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of thing that happens in families every single day, in every country, in every culture. A family decides who you should love, and when you choose differently, they make you pay for it. Not with money, not with words, with the one thing they know will break you, their presence. And for a woman like Esther, who had no one else in this world, that threat was not a bluff. It was a death sentence for her heart. Esther Okafor was 29 years old. She was the kind of woman you noticed second, not because she wasn't beautiful, but because her beauty was quiet, the kind that revealed itself in layers. She had deep brown skin, wide-set eyes with lashes so long they cast shadows on her cheeks when she looked down, and a small, precise mouth that she pressed into a firm line when she was thinking. She was not tall, 5'4", with narrow shoulders and hands that moved when she talked, shaping the air into the words she couldn't always find. She had a mole on her left temple, and she wore small gold hoop earrings every single day, the same ones her grandmother had given her on her 16th birthday, the ones she slept in, showered in, and had never once removed in 13 years. Esther had a habit of standing in doorways, not walking through them but standing in them, one hand on the frame, watching a room before entering it. She had been doing this since she was a child. Her grandmother once told her it was because Esther had been left at the door too many times, and she wanted to make sure the room would keep her before she stepped inside. Esther was left at a door when she was 11 months old. Her biological mother, a woman Esther knew nothing about, not even her name, placed her in a wicker basket on the front steps of a church in Enugu. The pastor found her at dawn. She was wrapped in a piece of yellow cloth, and she was not crying. The pastor said that was the thing he remembered most, a baby that did not cry. He said it broke his heart worse than if she had screamed. The pastor called the Okafor family. Chief Augustus Okafor and his wife, Mama Ngozi, were prominent members of the church. They had 3 children of their own, 2 sons and a daughter. They were respected, well-known, and generous with their money, if not always with their warmth. Mama Ngozi took one look at the baby in the yellow cloth and said, "Bring her to me." She named her Esther, because Esther in the Bible was an orphan who became a queen. Mama Ngozi believed in names the way other people believed in medicine. She thought if you called a thing by its highest name, it would rise to meet it. The Okafor family raised Esther. They gave her a room in their compound house, a large, noisy, cinder block house painted pale green with a corrugated iron roof and a courtyard where chickens wandered freely and children played until the sun went down. The house smelled like palm oil and thyme because Mama Ngozi cooked every meal from scratch, standing at a blackened gas stove in a kitchen so small 2 people could not pass each other without touching. The kitchen had a window above the sink that looked out at a mango tree so large its shade covered half the courtyard. Esther grew up watching that tree change with the seasons, dropping fruit in summer, going bare in harmattan, always coming back. Mama Ngozi was 61 now. She was a stout woman with thick arms and a face that held equal measures of sternness and love, the way a good pot holds heat, evenly, completely, without letting any escape. She wore her wrapper tied high above her waist and a head tie in matching fabric, and she moved through her kitchen with the authority of a woman who had fed a family of 7 for 40 years and had never once served a cold plate. She called every child in the compound my own, and she meant it. But the way she said it to Esther was different, softer, more careful, as if she knew that Esther needed the words more than the others, because the others had never doubted they belonged. Chief Augustus was 66. He was a retired civil servant who had worked in the lands ministry for 32 years. He was a tall, thin man with a narrow face and gray hair cropped close to his scalp, and a voice that carried the weight of a man who was accustomed to being obeyed without raising it. He sat in a wooden chair on the veranda every evening, listening to the radio, drinking a bottle of Star Lager, and surveying his compound like a captain surveys a ship. He loved Esther, but his love came with conditions that he never spoke aloud, and that Esther had spent her whole life trying to meet. The Okafor children were Chukwuemeka, called Emeka, the eldest son, 35, who ran a transport company, Obiora, the second son, 32, who worked in banking in Lagos, and Adeze, the daughter, 26, the youngest of the biological children, who was studying pharmacy at the university. Emeka and Obiora treated Esther the way older brothers treat a sister, with a mixture of protection and indifference, defending her from outsiders, but rarely asking about her inner life. Adeze was closer to Esther in age and in feeling. They had shared a room for 14 years. They braided each other's hair. They whispered in the dark about boys and futures and fears. Adeze called Esther my sister without ever adding the word adopted, and that small omission was one of the most generous things anyone had ever done for Esther. Esther worked as a physiotherapist at a rehabilitation clinic in the city. She'd gone to university on a scholarship Chief Augustus helped her secure, and she had graduated with honors. She made decent money. She sent a portion home every month, money for Mama Ngozi's medication, for the compound's water bill, for Adeze's tuition. She never missed a payment. She never complained about the amount. She understood, without it ever being said, that the money was not just generosity. It was proof. Proof that she was grateful. Proof that she was worthy of the room they gave her, and the name they put on her, and the place at the table that was never quite as permanent as she needed it to be. And then she met Daniel. But what happened next changed everything. Daniel Amadi was 33 years old. He was a carpenter. Not the kind who works in a factory pressing boards into furniture. The kind who works with his hands, who shapes wood with chisels and planes and sandpaper worn thin from use, who can look at a piece of timber and see the table it wants to become. He was tall, lean, dark-skinned, with strong hands calloused from years of work and quiet eyes that noticed things most people missed. A crack in a door frame, a wobble in a chair, the way a woman stood in a doorway like she wasn't sure the room would keep her. Daniel had a workshop on Obiagu Road. It was a small open-air space with a corrugated roof and sawdust covering every surface. It smelled like cedar and varnish and sweat. He made tables, chairs, bed frames, wardrobes. He carved headboards with patterns from his village, spirals and birds and leaves that twisted into shapes that looked like music frozen into wood. He charged modest prices. He delivered everything himself in a battered pickup truck with a cracked windshield and a radio that only played one station. Daniel was not rich. He was not poor. He was the kind of man who occupied the space between, where hard work fills your stomach but never your savings account, where your hands are always busy but your pockets are never full. He met Esther at the clinic. He had injured his shoulder lifting a wardrobe into the truck bed. The doctor referred him to physiotherapy. Esther worked on his shoulder 3 times a week for 4 weeks. She was professional. She was focused. She pressed her fingers into the muscle of his shoulder and showed him exercises, and told him to use ice at night and heat in the morning, and to stop lifting things alone. Daniel came back a 5th week even though his shoulder was healed. "I think it's still stiff," he said. Esther looked at him. She knew his shoulder was fine. She had been watching it move for 4 weeks. She pressed her fingers into the muscle anyway. "It feels fine to me," she said. "Maybe you should check again next week." Esther bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. "Maybe I should." He came back the next week, and the next. By the 4th extra week, they both stopped pretending it was about the shoulder. He asked her to have dinner with him. She said yes. He took her to a small restaurant on New Market Road that had plastic chairs and fluorescent lights and the best pepper soup in the city. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about the wood. She told him about the doorways. He told her about his mother, who died when he was 15, and who used to say that a man's hands tell you everything about his heart. Esther told him about the yellow cloth and the church steps and the name Mama Ngozi chose for her. Daniel listened the way his hands worked wood, carefully, patiently, without rushing, finding the grain. Esther means queen, he said. I know. Your mother was right to name you that. She's not my mother. Daniel looked at her. She raised you. She fed you. She gave you her name.
What else does a mother do?
Esther had no answer for that. But the question stayed with her. It followed her home and sat beside her bed and was still there when she woke up. They dated for a year, quietly, carefully. Esther did not tell the Okafors. She was not ashamed of Daniel. She was afraid of what they would say. Because she knew, she had always known, that Chief Augustus had plans for her. Not cruel plans, practical ones. He wanted Esther to marry well, to marry someone who would reflect the investment the family had made. A banker, a doctor, a man from a good family with a good name and a good car. A man who would prove that the girl they took from the church steps had risen to meet her name. A carpenter from Obiagu Road was not what Chief Augustus had in mind, and that was only the beginning. Esther told Mama Ngozi first. She chose a Wednesday afternoon, when the compound was quiet and the other children were away.
She sat in the kitchen while Mama Ngozi stirred a pot of egusi soup, the steam rising thick and fragrant, the mango tree casting long shadows through the window. Mama, I've met someone. Mama Ngozi did not look up from the pot. What kind of someone? A man. A good man. What does he do? Esther paused. She pressed her gold earrings with her fingertips. He's a carpenter, Mama. The stirring stopped. Mama Ngozi set the wooden spoon across the pot and turned around slowly. She looked at Esther the way she looked at a pot that was about to boil over, with urgency, with concern, with the knowledge that if she didn't act now, things would spill. A carpenter, Mama Ngozi said. Yes, Mama. Esther, do you know what your father will say? He's not my father, Mama. The words came out before Esther could stop them. She pressed her lips together. She hadn't meant to say that. She had never said that. Mama Ngozi's face changed. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not anger. Something older. Something that had been buried for 28 years. He is your father, Mama Ngozi said quietly. He may not have made you, but he raised you. He paid your school fees. He gave you his name. Don't throw that away because you're scared of what he'll think. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm telling you about the man I love. Mama Ngozi turned back to the soup. She stirred slowly. The kitchen was thick with steam and silence. Bring him to the house, she finally said. Let us see this carpenter. But this story is far from over. Daniel came to the compound on a Sunday afternoon. He wore his best shirt, white, pressed, tucked into dark trousers. He had polished his shoes. He brought a gift, a small carved wooden box he had made himself, with a pattern of spiraling leaves on the lid. Inside was a bottle of palm wine. Chief Augustus sat on the veranda in his wooden chair. He did not stand when Daniel arrived. He looked at Daniel's shoes, which were polished but old. He looked at Daniel's truck parked outside the compound gate with its cracked windshield and single-station radio. He looked at Daniel's hands, large, calloused, scarred from years of work. What do you do? Chief Augustus asked. I'm a carpenter, sir. I have a workshop on Obiagu Road. How much do you make? Daniel told him honestly. The number was not impressive. Chief Augustus's expression did not change, but the temperature on the veranda dropped. Mama Ngozi served food. She set a plate in front of Daniel, jollof rice, fried chicken, plantain. She served it on the good plates, the ones reserved for guests. Chief Augustus noticed. He said nothing. They ate. Daniel complimented the food.
Mama Ngozi nodded. Chief Augustus asked questions: where Daniel was from, who his people were, what his father did. Daniel's father was a welder who died when Daniel was 19. His mother was dead. He had one sister in the village.
No connections, no influence, no family name that opened doors. After Daniel left, Chief Augustus sat on the veranda and finished his beer in silence. Esther stood in the doorway, watching, waiting, her hand on the frame. "No," Chief Augustus said. "Papa." "I said no, Esther. That man has nothing. No name, no family, no future that I can see. You are an Okafor. You will marry an Okafor's equal, not a carpenter. He is a good man. Good is not enough. Good does not pay school fees. Good does not build a house. Good does not protect a family's reputation." "What reputation, Papa? I came from a church doorstep." The veranda went silent. Chief Augustus set his bottle down. He looked at Esther with an expression she had never seen before, hurt so deep it looked like anger. "That is exactly why you must marry well," he said. "Because you started with nothing, and I gave you everything. And everything I gave you means nothing if you throw it away on a man who makes chairs." Esther's eyes burned. She gripped the doorframe so hard her knuckles paled. "I am not throwing anything away. I am choosing who I love." "Then you are choosing wrong." He picked up his beer. He turned on the radio. The conversation was over. Now, here is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Esther did not stop seeing Daniel. She continued for 3 more months. She visited his workshop. She sat on the bench near the door and watched him work. The way the muscles in his forearms moved. The way the sawdust settled on his shoulders like snow. The way he hummed while he sanded. Low, tuneless melodies that reminded her of the kitchen in the compound, and the steam from Mama Ngozi's pot, and the mango tree through the window. Daniel made her a chair. A single chair from a piece of Iroko wood, hard and golden, with a curved back and a seat polished so smooth it felt like touching water. He set it in the corner of his workshop. "This is your chair," he said. "Nobody sits in it but you." Esther sat in it every time she visited. It was the first chair she had ever owned, the first piece of furniture that was hers and hers alone. She ran her fingers across the armrest and felt the wood grain and thought about what Daniel's mother said, that a man's hands tell you everything about his heart. 3 months after the Sunday visit, Daniel asked Esther to marry him. He did it in the workshop, at the end of a Saturday, when the light was coming through the corrugated roof in long golden bars, and the sawdust was floating in the air like tiny stars. He got on one knee and held out a ring, a simple gold band with a small stone, not a diamond, something warmer, an amber-colored stone he had found at a market and had set by a jeweler friend. "I can't give you a big house," he said. "I can't give you a name that opens doors, but I can give you a chair that nobody else sits in, and a life where you never have to stand in doorways wondering if the room will keep you. Because I will always keep you, Esther. Always." Esther looked at the ring. She looked at Daniel. She looked at the chair in the corner, golden and smooth, waiting for her. "Yes," she said. She took the ring. She put it on. It fit perfectly. But she did not tell the Okafors. Not yet. She wore the ring on a chain around her neck, hidden under her shirt, pressed against her chest where she could feel it with every heartbeat. "Stay with us, because what happens next will shock you." Adeze found out. Of course she did. Sisters share rooms for 14 years and nothing stays hidden. Adeze noticed the chain. She asked about it. Esther showed her the ring. Adeze held it in her palm and looked at it for a long time. "It's beautiful," she said. "You're not going to tell me I'm making a mistake?" Adeze gave the ring back. "You love him. I've seen it. You come home from his workshop smelling like wood and smiling like a person who just remembered they're alive. I would never call that a mistake. Papa will never accept it." Adeze was quiet. Then she said, "Then you have to decide, Esther. Are you going to live Papa's life or yours?" Esther wore the ring on her neck for 2 more weeks. Then one Sunday at dinner, when the whole family was seated at the table in the courtyard, Chief Augustus at the head, Mama Ngozi beside him,
Emeka and Obiora and Adeze around the edges, and Esther in her usual seat, the one closest to the kitchen, the one that could be pulled away without leaving a gap. She reached under her shirt, unclasped the chain, and set the ring on the table. "I'm getting married," she said. The courtyard went silent. The chickens clucked. The mango tree rustled. Chief Augustus looked at the ring. His face hardened. "To the carpenter. His name is Daniel." Chief Augustus picked up the ring.
He held it between his thumb and forefinger and examined it the way he would examine a coin he suspected was counterfeit. "This stone," he said, "this is not even a diamond. It doesn't need to be." Chief Augustus set the ring down. He folded his hands. His voice dropped to the tone Esther feared most. Not the shouting tone, the quiet one. The one that felt like all the air being slowly pulled from a room. "Esther, I will say this clearly so there is no confusion. If you marry this man, you are no longer part of this family. You will not carry our name. You will not enter this compound. You will not sit at this table. You will not call me Papa. And the money you send every month? Keep it. We will not take money from a woman who dishonors us." The courtyard was airless. Mama Ngozi was looking at her hands. Emeka was staring at the table. Obiora shifted in his chair. Adeze's eyes were full of tears. Esther looked at the man who raised her, the man who paid her school fees and gave her his name, and sat on this veranda every evening listening to the radio while she cooked and cleaned and sent money, and stood in doorways waiting to be told she belonged. "You would erase me," Esther whispered, "because I fell in love with a carpenter." "You would erase yourself," Chief Augustus said, "by choosing a man who cannot give you anything." "He gave me a chair, Papa. One chair. And in that chair, I never once wondered whether I deserved to sit down." Chief Augustus went still. Mama Ngozi looked up. The courtyard held its breath. "You have until midnight Friday," Chief Augustus said. "If you come to this house before midnight on Friday without that ring, we will forget this ever happened. If you don't, then we are done." He stood. He walked inside. The screen door closed behind him. And just when Esther thought she could not feel more alone, Mama Ngozi spoke. "Come to the kitchen," Mama Ngozi said. They sat in the kitchen. The stove was cold. The mango tree was dark outside the window. Mama Ngozi poured 2 cups of water from a plastic jug and set one in front of Esther. "Tell me about the chair," Mama Ngozi said. Esther told her. About the Iroko wood, about the curved back, about how nobody else sat in it, about how it was the first thing that was ever only hers. Mama Ngozi listened. She held her cup of water with both hands. "When your father and I took you from the church," Mama Ngozi said, "I held you in that yellow cloth and I made a promise. I promised God that I would raise you as my own, and I have tried. But I have also failed, Esther, because somewhere along the way, I let your father's expectations become your cage, and I said nothing. I watched you send money and cook meals and stand in doorways, and I said nothing because I was afraid that if I spoke up, he would put me outside too." Esther stared at her. "I am 61 years old," Mama Ngozi continued. "I have cooked 10,000 meals in this kitchen. I have stirred 10,000 pots, and I have swallowed 10,000 things I should have said. I will not swallow this one." She set down the cup. "Marry your carpenter, Esther. Marry him and live your life. And if your father closes this door, then I will open another one. Because a mother does not stop being a mother because her husband is a fool." Esther broke. She put her head on the table and she cried the way she had not cried since she was a child, since the nights when she lay in bed beside Adeze and wondered why the woman in the yellow cloth left her and whether anyone would ever choose to keep her. Mama Ngozi sat beside her. She did not touch her. She just sat there and let Esther cry. And when the crying was done, she poured her a fresh cup of water and said, "Drink. You'll need your strength."
But what Esther didn't know yet was that Daniel had already gone to see Chief Augustus.
On Wednesday, day 4 of the 7, Daniel drove his battered truck to the compound. He did not call ahead. He did not bring palm wine. He wore his work clothes because he came straight from the workshop. There was sawdust on his collar and varnish under his fingernails. Chief Augustus was on the veranda. He saw Daniel's truck and did not stand. Daniel walked up the steps and stood in front of the man who had the power to erase the woman he loved. "I am not here to ask your permission," Daniel said. "You already said no. I am here to tell you what I plan to give your daughter, not because I owe you an explanation, but because Esther loves you and I respect anything she loves." Chief Augustus said nothing. He held his beer. He waited. "I cannot give her a house on Victoria Island. I cannot give her a car with air conditioning. I cannot give her the name of a man whose father was a banker or a judge. What I can give her is a chair she never has to earn the right to sit in.
A kitchen where she eats first, not last. A door she can walk through without wondering if the room will keep her. I can give her a man whose hands build things instead of conditions." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. He set it on the railing in front of Chief Augustus. It was a carved wooden bird, small enough to fit in a palm. Iroko wood, polished to a glow. Its wings were spread and its head was tilted upward, and every feather was detailed with the kind of patience that only a man who loves his work can produce. "I made this for Esther the night I decided to marry her," Daniel said. "It took me 40 hours. I carved it by hand because my mother used to say that the things worth giving are the things that cost you time, not money." He stepped back. "I'm not asking you to approve. I'm telling you that I love her, and that I will take care of her for the rest of my life, and that if you shut your door, I will build her a new one."
Daniel turned and walked to his truck. He drove away. He did not look back. Chief Augustus sat on the veranda for a long time after Daniel left. He held the wooden bird in his hand. He turned it over. He felt the grain. He felt the hours. He did not throw it away. Now let me tell you about day 7, about midnight, about the choice. Friday came. The sun went down. The compound was quiet. Chief Augustus sat on the veranda. Mama Ngozi was in the kitchen, not cooking, just sitting, her hands in her lap, waiting. At 10 o'clock, Emeka called Esther. He said, "Come home, Esther. Just take the ring off and come home. Papa will forget. It will go back to normal." At 10:30, Obiora sent a text. It said, "Think about what you're giving up." At 11, Adeze called. She was crying. "I don't want to lose you. Whatever you choose, I don't want to lose you." At 11:15, Esther sat in Daniel's workshop. The workshop was dark except for a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. She was sitting in her chair, the Iroko chair, golden and smooth. Daniel was beside her on the workbench, sanding a piece of wood by hand, slowly, rhythmically, the sound like breathing. "You don't have to choose me," Daniel said without looking up. "I mean it, Esther. If keeping your family means walking away from this, I understand. I would rather lose you to love than keep you in pain." Esther looked at him. This man who carved birds that took 40 hours and made chairs that felt like belonging and sanded wood at midnight while the woman he loved decided whether to stay or go. "Daniel." He stopped sanding. He looked at her. "I have spent my entire life trying to prove that I deserve a seat at their table. I sent money, I cooked meals, I stood in doorways, I swallowed things I should have said. And after 28 years, the moment I choose for myself, they take the chair away." She stood up. She walked to the bench. She took his hands, rough, calloused, warm, covered in sawdust. "You built me a chair that no one can take. That is not a small thing, Daniel. That is everything." She didn't go to the compound. She didn't call. She didn't text. She sat in her chair and held Daniel's hands, and at midnight, the phone stopped ringing. And the silence that followed was not empty. It was full.
full of a woman who had finally stopped standing in the doorway and walked all the way into the room. Now let me tell you what happened after midnight. The wedding was small, 12 people, held in Daniel's workshop on a Saturday morning 3 weeks later. Daniel had cleared the space and swept the sawdust and hung strings of small white lights from the corrugated roof. He had built an arch from scrap wood and sanded it smooth and carved spirals and birds and leaves into the surface. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever seen made from leftover timber.
Esther wore a white dress she bought at a market stall. Mama Ngozi had altered it on Thursday night, sitting at her sewing machine in the kitchen while Chief Augustus slept. She added lace to the hem from a piece she had been saving for Adeze's wedding someday. She folded the dress into a bag, drove to Daniel's workshop at 6 in the morning, and handed it to Esther. "Mama, you came?" "Of course I came. Did you think a locked door would stop me?" Mama Ngozi sat in the front row. She wore her best wrapper and her best head tie, and she sat with her back straight and her hands folded, and she watched her daughter marry a carpenter. And she did not cry, because she had already cried every night that week, and there was nothing left. Instead, she smiled. A full, cracked, defiant smile that said to the world and to her husband and to anyone who was watching, "This is my child, and I am here, and I will not be moved." Adeze came. She stood beside Esther and held flowers she had picked from the compound garden that morning before Chief Augustus woke up. She was shaking, but she was there. Daniel's sister came from the village. She brought a pot of soup and a bag of rice, and she cooked in the back of the workshop with Mama Ngozi, like they had known each other for years instead of hours. The pastor who found Esther on the church steps 28 years ago married them. He was 81 now, stooped, with white hair and a voice that trembled but carried. When he said, "Who gives this woman?" Mama Ngozi stood. "I do," she said, and her voice did not tremble at all. Chief Augustus did not come. Emeka did not come. Obiora did not come. 3 empty chairs in a room full of people who chose to be there. Esther looked at those chairs once, and then she looked at Daniel, and she did not look at them again. After the ceremony, Esther sat in her Iroko chair, which Daniel had moved to the front of the workshop for the day. She held the carved wooden bird in one hand and Daniel's hand in the other. Mama Ngozi brought her a plate of jollof rice and set it in her lap. "Eat," Mama Ngozi said. "A bride who doesn't eat is a bride who doesn't believe her own happiness." Esther ate, every bite. The months after the wedding were quiet and steady, the way a river is quiet when it has finally found its course. Esther and Daniel lived in a rented flat near the workshop. 2 rooms, a small kitchen, a bathroom with a shower head that produced more noise than water. The Iroko chair sat by the window. The carved bird sat on the nightstand. Daniel built a bed frame from wood he had been aging in the workshop for 2 years. He said good wood needs time, and good marriages need the same thing. Esther continued working at the clinic. Daniel's business grew slowly. He received a commission to build custom furniture for a hotel in the city, then another, then a private residence. His reputation spread the way reputations do in small markets, through hands, through word, through the quiet evidence of quality. Chief Augustus did not call. He did not write. He sat on his veranda every evening and drank his beer and listened to his radio, and the chair where Esther used to wait in the doorway was empty, and he looked at it every night, but he would not say her name. Mama Ngozi visited Esther every Wednesday. She brought soup in a plastic container and gossip from the compound, and stories about the chickens and updates on Adeze's exams. She never mentioned Chief Augustus's silence. She didn't need to. They both felt it the way you feel a missing tooth, constantly, absently, with the tongue always going to the empty space. But the real test came 7 months later. Chief Augustus had a stroke. Mild. He was on the veranda when it happened. His left hand went numb, his speech slurred. Mama Ngozi called the ambulance. He was taken to the hospital and stabilized. The doctor said he needed rest, medication, and someone to manage his recovery.
Emeka was traveling. Obiora was in Lagos. Adaize was in the middle of exams. Mama Ngozi called Esther. Esther went. She did not hesitate. She did not ask whether she was welcome. She drove to the hospital in Daniel's truck with the cracked windshield, and she walked into Chief Augustus's room, and she stood in the doorway the way she always stood in doorways, one hand on the frame, watching before entering. Chief Augustus was lying in the bed. He looked smaller. His tall frame seemed to have compressed, the way a building settles after years of weight. His eyes were open. He saw her. He did not say anything. He looked at her, and then he looked at the ceiling, and then he looked at her again. Esther walked in. She sat in the chair beside his bed. She took his hand. His hand was cold and thin, and the skin was loose over the bones. "I'm here, Papa," she said. His chin trembled. His left hand, the one the stroke had weakened, twitched in her grip. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I came. I told you not to. I know." He closed his eyes. A tear slid from the corner of his eye and ran along the crease of his temple and disappeared into the pillow. "The bird," he said. "The one your husband made." "Yes, Papa?" "I kept it on my nightstand. Every night since he brought it." He swallowed. 40 hours. He spent 40 hours on a bird for a man who told him he was nothing. Esther squeezed his hand. "I was wrong, Esther. I was wrong about the chair and the name and the ring and every condition I ever placed on a child who came to me in a yellow cloth. You didn't need to earn your place. You had it the moment Mama Ngozi said, 'Bring her to me.'" He opened his eyes. They were red and wet and raw. "I spent 28 years giving you everything I thought mattered. And I missed the only thing that actually did." "What's that, Papa?"
Telling you that no matter who you loved or who you married or how much money you sent home, you were already mine. You were always mine. Esther put her head on the edge of his bed. She held his hand with both of hers. She cried. He rested his weak hand on her hair, and they stayed like that for a long time. Father and daughter, the monitor beeping, the fluorescent light humming, the room full of something that was not forgiveness exactly, but was close enough to touch. Chief Augustus came home from the hospital after 10 days. Esther managed his recovery. She came to the compound every morning at 7, made his breakfast, gave him his medication, walked him slowly around the courtyard while the chickens scattered and the mango tree watched. She did his physiotherapy exercises with him. She was, after all, a physiotherapist, and she pressed her fingers into his shoulder and his arm and his hand, the same way she had pressed them into Daniel's shoulder 3 years ago, with patience and precision and a care that went deeper than technique. Daniel came with her on Saturdays. He fixed the loose railing on the veranda. He repaired a broken shelf in the kitchen. He sanded the wooden chair on the veranda, Chief Augustus's chair, and refinished it with the same oil he used on the Iroko chair, so that father and daughter sat in wood polished by the same hands. One Saturday afternoon, Chief Augustus watched Daniel working on the veranda railing. He was sitting in his refinished chair, a cup of tea beside him, the carved bird in his pocket. "Daniel," he said. Daniel looked up. "Come sit with me." Daniel set down his tools. He sat in the chair beside Chief Augustus. The veranda creaked. The chickens clucked. The radio played something soft and old. "I owe you an apology," Chief Augustus said. "You don't, sir." "I do. I looked at your hands and saw a man who makes chairs. I should have looked at your hands and seen a man who builds." Daniel was quiet. He looked at his hands, calloused and scarred and warm. "Your mother was right," Chief Augustus said. "A man's hands tell you everything about his heart." Daniel looked at him. "You remember that?" "I remember everything you said on my veranda that day. Every word. I was too proud to respond, but I heard you." They sat together in silence. 2 men on a veranda, the mango tree swaying, the radio playing, the afternoon settling around them like a blanket. 9 months after the wedding, Esther gave birth to a baby girl. She was born in the hospital on a Tuesday morning at 6:14. She weighed 6 pounds, and she had her mother's wide-set eyes and her father's strong hands. And when she cried loud,
the kind of cry that fills a room and tells the world she intended to be heard. They named her Ngozi, after Mama. Mama Ngozi held the baby in the hospital room. She sat in the chair beside the bed, and she held this child the way she had held Esther 28 years ago, carefully, fiercely, with the certainty of a woman who understood that love is not something you earn. It is something you receive. And the only thing you owe in return is to pass it on. My own, Mama Ngozi whispered. You are my own. Adeze brought flowers. Emeka sent money. Obiora called from Lagos. Chief Augustus came in person. He walked into the hospital room slowly, leaning on a cane Daniel had carved for him, Iroko wood, polished, with a bird on the handle. He looked at the baby. He looked at Esther. He looked at Daniel. She's beautiful, he said. She is, Papa.
He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the carved bird, the one Daniel had made, the one he had kept on his nightstand for 9 months. He set it on the windowsill of the hospital room, facing outward, its wings spread, its head tilted toward the sky. For her, he said, so she knows from the beginning that she can fly. Esther looked at the bird. She looked at her father. She looked at her husband. She looked at her daughter in Mama Ngozi's arms. She looked at the window. The morning light was coming through, warm, golden, like the wood of a chair built by hands that knew how to wait. She pressed her gold earrings, the ones her grandmother gave her 13 years ago, and she stepped away from the doorway. All the way in, both feet, no hand on the frame, because the room would keep her. It always would. And so the story ends. But before you go, like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Tell us where you're watching from and what this story taught you. We read every single comment. See you in the next story.